Well, Cavs fans, you guys got your wish and who y'all wanted at the head coach position as the Cavaliers hired Kenny Atkinson to be their head coach moving forward. This is Sports Guy Talking that you guys are watching and listening to. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am here today to talk about the real reason Kenny Atkinson was hired by the Cavaliers, as he will be replacing JB Bickerstaff at the head coach position. Remember, Kenny Atkinson has had plenty of coaching experience, as he was a former head coach for the Nets from 2016 to 2020. In fact, Kenny Atkinson was even an assistant head coach for the Warriors when they won the title in 2022, which means the resume of Kenny Atkinson is quite impressive compared to his peers. Before I say anything else, though, I want to present you guys with the topic question. So here it is. Was the Kenny Atkinson hire a good move for the Cavaliers? On paper, yes, Kenny Atkinson was the best coach available on the market for what the Cavs needed. What did the Cavs need? They needed more offense. What was the biggest criticism of JB Bickerstaff? The fact that his offensive schemes were not very efficient and that they were not very creative. And what is Kenny Atkinson's greatest strength? Offense, offense, and offense. And don't get me wrong, Kenny Atkinson, he can coach defense as well. You look at how the Brooklyn Nets, they played really good defense when Kenny Atkinson was the head coach for their franchise. But the main calling card that Kenny Atkinson has is offense, offense, and then offense. What does Kenny Atkinson like to do in his offensive sets and schemes? He likes to call a lot of three-point shots for three-point shooters. What did the Cavaliers need more of? Three-point shooters and being able to space the floor effectively. And even though I didn't agree with the decision to fire JB Bickerstaff, I understand why the Cleveland Cavaliers did it. They fired JB Bickerstaff not because they didn't think he was a good head coach, but because of the fact they felt like this was JB's ceiling as a head coach. You look at how Bickerstaff, he got the Cavaliers to the second round of the NBA playoffs, but it was clear that JB Bickerstaff was never going to be an elite head coach. I personally never even thought that JB Bickerstaff was a top coach in the NBA. I thought JB Bickerstaff was a decent head coach. I think he's definitely a top half head coach in the NBA. I'm kind of surprised more teams are not interested in JB Bickerstaff as their head coach. But again, I understand why the Cleveland Cavaliers fired JB Bickerstaff. It was because of the fact that they felt like his offensive schemes were lethargic and boring. And obviously, what sells tickets? Offense, offense, and offense. And obviously, Kenny Atkinson can provide that for the Cleveland Cavaliers. You look at how the Cavaliers, they have a pretty solid roster on paper. Am I saying this roster is championship caliber? No. I don't even think they're an elite team in the Eastern Conference, but they've got a roster of Donovan Michell, who's an all-star player. They've got Darius Garland, who's a decent basketball player. They've got Max Strus, a good three-point shooter. They've got Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, the Twin Towers for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Their defense is pretty good with them. And then, of course, they've got Caris LeVert off the bench. So obviously the Cavs, they're six deep as far as I'm concerned in terms of being able to be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference. They've also got Isaac Okoro. I don't necessarily love Okoro that much. I don't really think he can space the floor that well, but we'll see if Kenny Atkinson can fix his shot or not. The point is, the Cleveland Cavaliers have a solid core to work with, and Kenny Atkinson is a solid head coach. I remember Kenny Atkinson was on the verge of taking the Hornets head coach job until he basically backed out of the Hornets. Kenny Atkinson was my guy that I wanted the Hornets to hire, so I was pretty devastated the Hornets didn't hire Kenny Atkinson. But look, the Cavs, they got a good head coach in Kenny Atkinson, and that he is definitely going to be one of the better head coaches in the NBA. I quite frankly thought that Kenny Atkinson got scapegoated when he was the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, because when he was hired by the Nets, what were the Nets? The Nets were essentially nothing, and they had a horrible future, and the roster was just straight up garbage. And what did Kenny Atkinson do? He didn't complain. He didn't cry about not having enough help on his roster. He went out there and developed the talent that he did have on the roster, and he got the most out of those Nets teams. You look how the Brooklyn Nets completely turned around the franchise under the guidance of Kenny Atkinson. He got a D'Angelo Russell-led team into the NBA playoffs. That already is an impressive job itself, because anytime D'Angelo Russell is your best player on the roster, you're definitely thinking that's a 30-win team. And obviously, he was able to get D'Angelo Russell to look a lot better than just the best player on a 30-win team. You look how D'Angelo Russell struggles to even be the third best player on a title contending team in the LA Lakers. But obviously, you look at how D'Angelo Russell on the Brooklyn Nets was a very good player, and Kenny Atkinson was able to get the most out of his production. He even got an all-star appearance out of D'Angelo Russell, and as a result of that, D'Angelo Russell ended up getting a lot of money from other NBA teams, and more importantly, the Brooklyn Nets were able to attract backed other stars in free agency as they were able to get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Of course, once Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving joined the Brooklyn Nets, they did nothing but scapegoat Kenny Atkinson on the Brooklyn Nets, but that's another story for another day. The point is, Kenny Atkinson is a really good head coach candidate, and the Cavaliers are very lucky that they were able to land him in this year's coaching cycle, because there were not a lot of good coaches in this year's cycle. You look at how there weren't really a lot of well-known candidates that everybody was trying to fight for. So to get a guy like Kenny Atkinson, that's pretty good in and of itself. But I want Cavs fans to understand this. Just because you guys hired Kenny Atkinson, that doesn't mean the Cavs return to being an elite team in the Eastern Conference the way that they were under the LeBron James era. When you hire Kenny Atkinson, yeah, you might have gotten an upgrade over JB Bickerstaff, but you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, the Eastern Conference is pretty good as far as I'm concerned. Am I saying that the Eastern Conference is an elite conference? No, but it is a solid conference. And right now, I don't think it's a guarantee that the Cavs are going to be nothing more than a play-in team in the Eastern Conference right now, which is one of the main reasons why I didn't love the decision to fire JB Bickerstaff at the head coach position, because he was able to get the Cavs to a top 4 seed on a roster that quite frankly did not deserve to be a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. And you look at how the Boston Celtics, they're title contenders. They're probably the title favorites next year. You look at how the Philadelphia 76ers, on paper, yes, they're better than the Cleveland Cavaliers, but they weren't better than them last year. We'll see how it plays out for the Philadelphia 76ers. I think they got to go ahead and get a guy like Paul George to get Joel Embiid some help, but we'll see what happens with that. And then, of course, you got the New York Knicks. They're a team on the rise in the Eastern Conference. They probably would have made the Eastern Conference Finals had their guys not gotten injured in the playoffs. And then you've got the Miami Heat. You can never count out Jimmy Buckets come playoff time, and the coaching of Eric Spoelstra. They're always going to be in the mix in the Eastern Conference. And then you got the Orlando Magic, a team that has a lot of young players, but they're really good at the game of basketball, and they did push the Cavaliers to 7 games last year, so you can't count out the Orlando Magic. They also might be signing Klay Thompson this offseason, so we'll see how it plays out for the Orlando Magic. I think they're a team to watch out in the Eastern Conference. And then you got the Indiana Pacers, who had the best offense in all of basketball last season, and they're going to get a lot of their main guys back, so it's going to be pretty competitive as to how the Eastern Conference will be next year. And then, of course, you've got the Milwaukee Bucks. You can't count out Giannis, you can't count out Damian Lillard, and you can't count out Chris Middleton. They've got a solid big 3 in Milwaukee, so we'll see what happens with the Eastern Conference next year. I don't think it's a guarantee that the Cavaliers are going to be a good basketball team, because you look at how their roster, yes, it's solid, but it's not necessarily a great roster. I'm not calling Donovan Mitchell a top 5 player at his position. He's a good player, don't get me wrong, but Donovan Mitchell is not necessarily this top 5 basketball player that is going to be carrying rosters all the time to the finals or to the conference finals on a yearly basis. He's just simply a really good player. What I'm trying to say is the Cleveland Cavaliers made a solid hire in Kenny Atkinson, mainly because he was the best coach on the market. But in terms of whether or not this is going to help the Cavaliers become title contenders in the Eastern Conference, no, I don't see that happening. It's not going to help the Cavs become a better basketball team today, in the sense that they're going to be competitive against the Boston Celtics. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers need to get at least another All-Star before we can really talk about the Cavs as a true title contending team, even in the weak Eastern Conference, mainly because of the fact that their roster is filled with too many role players. And even though I like those role players can only get you so far in the NBA playoffs. Yes, I know the Celtics did, but they also had 2 star players in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. The Cleveland Cavaliers don't have 2 star players on the roster. They've got Donovan Mitchell, who's a star, who's the second star on the Cleveland Cavaliers. There's not really a second star in there whatsoever. But it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with Kenny Atkinson on the Cleveland Cavaliers, because he is a good head coach. I thought he got scapegoated when he was the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. So we'll see what happens with Kenny Atkinson in Cleveland. But expectations are going to be sky high for the Cavs next year, because they fired a coach who won a playoff series for them this past year, and he made the playoffs in each of the last 2 years with a roster that quite frankly was not that great to begin with. So we'll see what happens with them. It's going to be interesting to see. And as far as the real reason Kenny Atkinson was hired by the Cavs, it's pretty simple. The Cavs wanted more offense, and they wanted the offense to improve. That's why they hired Kenny Atkinson. Based on that logic, that's a pretty good hire by the Cavs. I got to give it to them. I got to give credit where credit is due. They hired a good coach in a cycle I didn't think was that good to begin with. So that is why the Kenny Atkinson hire was a solid move for the Cavaliers, considering the circumstances surrounding this year's coaching carousel in the NBA. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking. Like the video, and please comment down below. If you guys do that, I may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That'll be for the @DustinAsTran Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram @DustinAsTran and at Sports Guy Talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter @DustinAsTran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel, Sports Guy Talking.